Hey, welcome to this tutorial. In this tutorial, we're going to be taking a look at the first part of an ongoing series, and that involves us logging in, actually getting a login, establishing a login with a PythonAnywhere, which is a cloud service that allows us to actually host a web app online on the cloud that's available and is attached to a URL so that we can use it. So we are going to first, I'm going to talk you through kind of how to get an account set up with PythonAnywhere, as I've already set up my account. So what we're looking at right here is the PythonAnywhere screen. If you go to pythonanywhere.com, you're going to get to the screen. And if you click login, you can see that there's a sign up here button. So if you've not already logged in, go ahead and click the sign up button. And what you're going to do is create a beginner account. So if you click create a beginner account, it'll take you to a simple form, and you're going to put in a username that's kind of like your screen name. It'll be used to name some things in your projects. So and then an email, a password, and then again your same password to verify. You're going to need to agree to the terms and conditions and click register. That will get you set up with a free account. And it'll allow you to host one web app at a time, and there's certain limitations in terms of your storage and the amount of CPU processor that you use, but for this small project it's going to be totally fine for it. So there is also an email verification, so it'll send you an email and ask you to click the link to verify your email. I believe it works without that, but it's always a good thing to do is to go ahead and verify the email in case you have any accessibility issues. So once you have your account, then you're log in. So my credentials already filled in here, so I'm going to go ahead and click the login with my username and password. And this brings us to the dashboard, or it should. Let's give it a second here. And let me click PythonAnywhere. There we go. All right, because it does say that I am now logged in. And you can see that you have a welcome up here. The first time you log in, there will be a tour. You're absolutely good to take the tour. It'll show you a few things. But they're the things that I'm going to go over now. So one of the things that that you'll want to look at is to sort of tour the main main navigation bar up here. So right now we're currently in our dashboard. It'll show us that we had some consoles recently started. Consoles are things like if you want to actually program in Python, or you want to run what's called a bash terminal session in order to install things, or if you're going to do some version control to back up your software. And then there's also SQL consoles in order to manage and create databases and modify databases. So those are the main three types of consoles. Your files, all of our files will be hosted here in the cloud on PythonAnywhere. And once we create our project, we'll end up with some files, and we can build out our app using the files. We don't have any access to notebooks with the free account. You need to have a paid account in order to create notebooks. Notebooks are a combination of markup and Python code that you can host, and people could come and look at your code and read your markup text. And so it's a great way of putting up tutorials, or a lot of data scientists use it in order to take notes and crunch numbers and visualize data. Currently, I don't have a web app, but we're going to be getting started with that web app very soon. So consoles, you can kind of take a quick look. Consoles, you have different Python and IPython types. There's the bash terminal I was talking about, which is kind of a command line interface, and then the MySQL. So those are some consoles. Files right now, all those are actually housed on PythonAnywhere within a home directory, and then a subdirectory with your username. So that's my username. And when we go to create a new project, we're going to end up with a new directory down here called My Site, and then it'll have files within it, and that's where we'll build out our application. So let's go ahead and take a look at web. We're going to go ahead and create a web app. So currently it shows that I have no web apps, so I'm going to click the blue button here in order to add a web app. So PythonAnywhere here is going to basically set up a like a little boilerplate setup for us. We're going to be using, you can use a lot of different frameworks with PythonAnywhere. The one we're using for this tutorial is called Flask. So we're going to go ahead and click add. Because we're in a free account, our web address is going to be your username.pythonanywhere.com, and we'll take a look at that once our app up with the boilerplate and goes to make sure it's actually working. So I'm going to click the blue button, and I'm going to scroll down. Oh, here we go. We need to hit next down here in the lower right. And here it's asking us for the Python web framework. And again, we're using Flask. There are others available. Django is more full-featured than Flask. The learning curve is steeper. It's considered a major framework as opposed to a minor framework. Flask is nice for learning because you're building everything kind of from scratch. And so probably good to start with Flask. And so that's what we're going to do in this tutorial. You can pick different versions of Python. We're going to shoot for the middle here. Python 3.6, very well established. And the tutorial we're following uses 3.6. So we're going to go ahead and select that. We're going to leave the default. Notice here it's going to add the directory my site, and it's going to put our first bit of code in here. flask_app.py is a Python file. So let's go ahead and hit next, and it will complete the setup. And then we will be off and running. We'll actually take a look at the code, walk through the code in a browser so we can kind of see what we're, see what's there. So in order to see your files, you guys can come up and click on Files. So let's take a look at what it's done. So here we now see this is new, this My Site. Okay, and if we click on My Site, just like a folder, we can see there's some temporary stuff that's kept here in PyCache. And then we've got our actual application, flask.app.py. So let's go and click on this. It'll open up a console in Python. And we can actually modify the code, but what we're interested in right now is just kind of taking a look at the code. So this is Python. The first line here has a hashtag, and in Python that means a one-line comment. So the compiler doesn't actually run this line of code. It's just a label for people looking at the code. It's a very simple Flask Hello World app for you to get started with. Often in Python, we import the abilities code that other people have created for us, and because we're creating a Flask application, we can see that what it's doing is it's taking from the Flask library or module, also package, and it's going to import a feature, and this feature is called Flask. And because Flask is capital, we know it's a class, which means that basically it defines an object. It's like the plan of an object, and when we go to instantiate that class, it actually makes it. So Flask is the name of the class that's really the micro framework app. And so in line 6, what they've done is they've created a variable app, but it's actually the name of an object. And then equal, remember, is an assignment operator. So it just means, it doesn't mean equal. Equal means equal in Python. I know that seems strange. But here app equals Flask means that it's creating or instantiating this Flask app that's got a bunch of different abilities and things we can do. It's instantiating it and it's naming it. So now we have what's called an instance of Flask, and that's our app. So once we've done that, we can use all of these cool abilities that are in this library of code, and right away this is one of those abilities. So this is what's known as a function decorator. And so in Flask, what these do is when we send off on our machine, like if I was to send a request on my URL, through my browser, and put curiousteacher907.pythonanywhere.com, this app actually receives that request. And if I have nothing after the slash, right, or any slash, nothing after it, I just have curiousteacher907.pythonanywhere.com, then what's going to happen is it's going to run. This makes the app run whatever the function is that's underneath it. So in this case, it's going to run a function, and def defines a function in Python, so it's a keyword, and that's why it's blue. From and import are also keywords up here. In this case, the people who created this kind of little boilerplate template for us, this app, called the function hello world, and every function has to have an open and close parenthesis. Now some functions can take an argument, a parameter actually. In this case we don't need one, and we've got the colon here. That's just part of the syntax for creating a function. Now this function is super simple. It only does one thing. It returns to the browser the phrase hello from Flask. And so when our browser goes to this website, curiousteacher907.pythonanywhere.com, it's going to, our app, if it's working, is going to return hello from Flask to the browser. It's not even in HTML. It's just plain text that's up there. Okay, so let's go ahead and try running this. We're going to open up a new browser tab up here, and we're going to go take a look. So if we type curious907.pythonanywhere.com, it's our username .pythonanywhere.com, and we hit enter. We've got coming soon, so it hasn't actually been created yet. So let me double check and see what's going on here. Curious Teacher 907. Curious. Oh, I missed my teacher. That's why. So it's coming soon because I didn't put the right URL in here. There we go. Curious Teacher. So let's give this a try. Hopefully it's going to say hello. There we go. Hello from Flask. So that's what we're telling it to do. We've tested out the functionality. It's set up. It's working. And now we can do a number of different things with it. So one of the things that we're going to do is we'll come in and go ahead and so you can see it, we're going to go ahead and test this out. We're going to change this, and one of the things you're able to do is you can return HTML, which makes things look a little fancier than just plain text. So let's make this a heading level 1. So in HTML, H1 is a tag. It usually means to enlarge the font. It gives it a certain font. It bolds it. You can style it in a lot of different ways. Let's put this is my shiny new Flask app! Exclamation point. And in HTML code, you need to end most tags have an end, and so that end is the angle brackets with the slash here. So if we save this, so if we go up here and we click save, we're going to save our file. We want to occasionally, when we're making changes, hit the refresh button so it updates the server. So we're going to click that, and that takes a little while. You see a little status symbol right here showing us it's taken a minute. And once it's done, we'll go back over to our site here, and we'll hit refresh. There you go. You can see this is now bold. It's bigger because it's a H1. It's a level 1 heading in HTML, and it's got the text that we put in. So indeed, it's still returning it. So now, sort of like the sky's the limit, we can have this app allow us to take different requests in the server and then turn around and spit out different things. Now here we're using just a simple line of text. Actually, it's a bit of HTML now that we've changed it. But one of the things that you're able to do is you will be able to actually use these things called templates. So rather than have the function return all of the HTML, what we'll do is we'll tell the return in the function to render a template, and we'll have a little directory with templates that has all of the HTML content and can actually have variables and other things in it. It can have some logic in it, can do some pretty powerful things. So that's our next step, is we're going to be getting into templates here in sort of phase 2 of the project. But now one of the things that we do need to do, that we've got it all set up, is we want to establish how to save and back up. And when we're programming, a lot of coders, most coders use what's called version control. So you'll see that sometimes with programs. It'll be like, oh, this is version 2.83. This is version 2.9. This is version 2.95. So they version it, and generally everything is saved at that different versions, and the different versions are released when they're ready to be released to the public so that people can use them. It saves everything, and it allows us to have restore points. And so it's a little complicated and cumbersome to get set up, but we're going to go ahead now and go through that setup so that we can periodically use this term called Git. It's a repository. In other words, we stick our code in it, and it keeps taking snapshots of everything that we've done. As long as we're good about telling it to do that, it'll save. It's like having multiple restore points, so we can always go back to an earlier point in our code. It also allows people to work on code together. So you can give a version of the code to somebody else, they can make changes, and you can pull those changes into your repository. So it's also a nice way of collaborating with people. But for now, we're largely just going to use it as a backup. So in order to do that, we're going to go into the menu over here. We are going to go into our, let's say, our files. And specifically what we want to do is we're in my site here. So let's go into my site so we can see everything. From here, we could open a bash console, and that's what we're going to need to do in order to work through that process of getting our Git repository set up. So we're going to click open bash console, and this is going to bring up, it's a command line interface. And so we're going to work through making sure that we've got this configured so that we can continually save it, and if we have to return to it, we can return to it. Okay, so let us get started here with Git. So the first thing I think that we're going to need to do is make sure we're in the right directory. So ls and bash is short for list. So, and that's it. That's our Flask app right now. We don't have other templates or any of the other stuff. And this is a little temporary thing. We actually want to get to ignore that. So I'll show you how to ignore that. So the very first thing we need to do is to configure, and we only need to do this once. We need to configure Git and tell it who we are and what our email address is so that this code is available to us. So we're going to use the term Git in config, and we use 2 dashes and global, and the first line dot user dot name, and then just put our name in parentheses or in double quotes, right? And then we need another line. Now if you want to hit the up arrow, it's going to repeat your last line, and it's pretty close to what we need to put. We need to put our email in. So I'm going to backspace and then put in my email address here. All right, so now that that is there, okay, we can initialize our get. Like we're just getting started, and init means we need to create an empty space for it. We need to create a home for it. So get init creates a home for it. And when we type get init and hit enter, it says, hey, we initialized a Git repository. And so it's going to keep it in the cloud in our my site, and it's going to keep it in a .git file, so which is often hidden. We don't see it, but we can call on it from our bash terminal. So there are a few things that are going to happen where we just don't really need to save them. So we're going to create, and cat allows us to create a little file, and greater than in this case means let's name the file, and we're going to make it a hidden file called get ignore. So this will check this file and basically see if there's anything it should ignore and not save. And there are a few things we don't really need it to save. So when you hit enter here, it's going to actually allow you to edit a file. So we're actually creating a little text file here, even though it doesn't quite look like that. We're going to use the wildcard and say we don't need any temporary Python files backed up. So we don't want any temporary ones backed up. And if we hit underscore pycache, we don't really, and then underscore, we don't need that saved either. So that's where certain things get cached, and it's not part of our original program, so we just don't need it. So we hit enter. Now we're done with our file, and in bash, if you hit Control D, as in dog, what'll happen is that file will be saved. Now it's hidden, so you won't see it when you hit ls, but it's there, okay? So the next thing we need to do is we need to check our Git status to see, well, what do we need to save? So if we hit Git status, it'll check the directory and see if there's anything that's not yet been saved, and it'll make them red. And of course we can see our new file, the get ignore we just created, and flask underscore app.py we have not saved yet. So those are the things that we need to add to our commit. We're committing them to the repository. We're going to send them into that repository. So we use git add, excuse me. So we're going to add them, and we're going to use get ignore because we want that one saved. And on the same line, we can put flask underscore app.py and get that saved. And so this queues that up to be put inside a repository. So now everything's ready. In fact, if we hit git, let's go ahead and use git commit. So git commit will actually save those files into that space we've created. It's good to use the -m flag with the quote and put a comment. Like this is our first commit. So we're just calling it what it is, and that's what the -n message is with the little double quotes here. So when we hit enter, you can see right here 2 files have been changed. So basically it's put that into our save repository, and we can keep adding saves to it, and they become sort of restore points, and we can go back. So you can check now if you go back to get status to see what's going on. It's like, hey, nothing to commit. In other words, the working directory is clean, meaning we haven't made any changes to it. As soon as we make a change to flask underscore app.py, for instance, then it'll be ready for another commit. The other thing you guys can do in Git is you could put git log, and it'll show you what you've done. So this is our first commit. It's owned by me, and there's my email address. It timestamps it, and you can see right there our first message, right? We put in our commit message. So as we continue to make commits, this log will get longer, and we'll be kind of checking on that. So this is going to be something we do ongoing just to make sure we save our code and we are doing what we need to do. So in the next installment, we will add another route in our flask underscore app.py and kind of play around a little bit with that so we understand what that app route is. and we'll actually restore back to an earlier point and make it go away, so you can see kind of also in a hands-on way what Git is capable of. So we'll kind of create a fake route and play around with it so we understand the code, and then we'll actually use Git in order to basically reset that and go back to a point previous to it. And then we'll be building out our web app. We will be adding some templates. We'll be using some HTML and Python in order to insert logic and content into our pages. And in the end, what we're going to be building is this app that's called Scratchpad, and it allows you to just put ideas up and save them into a database. So later on, we'll be connecting a little database. So all that's coming up in the next series. But if you're here, you're good for you're sort of good for phase 2. So thanks for your time and energy. Thanks for following along.